W, the W tag. Now, many things begin with W. Wimpy Kid, Wolf, as in Virginia Woolf, but also werewolves, Minette Waters, a wagon, Sarah Waters, watch, wine. My wife likes to make these decorated wine bottles. Who? And my qualifications come from universities with W, the University of Wales. I got a degree in librarianship and geography. Wales and Wales are not quite the same thing. This is a whale blowing a whistle. And University of Wolverhampton, where I got my education certificate. But I actually studied for it in Worcester. Here's Worcester, underwater. Worcester's on the River Severn, the longest river in Great Britain. Got the Willis Jeeps, Robert Wilson, the world. But there's not many countries beginning with W. I'm not even sure if Rose is Scalidando to Wallis and Fortuna or Western Sahara. And then we've got word games. I love word games. I used to play a lot of Scrabble. And we've got Upwards, and there's Lexicon, What a World, the worst case scenario. And near Halloween we've got Witches, and there's a walrus with a wagon. This is the W tag. Hello, my name is Jim. Welcome to my booktube channel about books and reading and stuff. We're approaching the end of the alphabet. Today I want to look at the W tag. Here we have a walrus with a wagon. W is for werewolf. Ooh, we're approaching Halloween. Have you read any books about werewolves? I haven't read the Twilight series, but I did read The Werewolf Principle by Clifford D. Seamack. This is about an amnesiac space traveller who finds his body is shared with a wolf-like alien, and he starts to get these wolf-like thoughts. The first X film I ever saw was American Werewolf in London, which was a lot of fun. It's one of the first films which mixed horror with comedy. I like it when genres collide. W is for witches. What's the last book you read about a witch? The last book I read about a witch was Out Front, the Following Sea by Leah Angstman. This was set in 17th century New England, and the hero, the protagonist, Ruth Minor, has been branded a witch, literally branded a witch, the letter W branded on her thighs. At this time in New England, a lot of people were branded as punishments, whether they were thieves or whatever. There was a lot of criminals, and Ruth's is a difficult story of trying to live her own life in a very patriarchal society in the late 1600s in New England and Connecticut and around there. Werewolves and witches and wizards. Who is your favourite literary wizard? Of course there's Harry Potter and also Harry Dresden, but my favourite would be Elric of Melniboné, who was created by Michael Moorcock. There were several books about Elric. I also followed a band called Hawkwind, who did the whole set around the tales of Elric. There's also Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Who is your favourite wizard? W is for women writers. What percentage of your reading is by women writers? Looking at my stats, over all time I've reviewed 76% men writers, 24% women writers. But in the last 6 months this has changed a lot, and my stats from Sirens suggests I've reviewed 63% women writers and 37% men writers. Although the stats seem to leave out those who identify as non-binary, and I've read at least 2 books by non-binary persons in the past year, Tracey Emin and AJ Odasso. W is for war. James Holder suggested I should do something about war. What is your favourite book about World War One? World War One was a war of mechanised slaughter. The British Army was described as lions led by donkeys. The High Command kept using tactics that didn't work and resulted in the slaughter of millions of expendable soldiers. The tactic of shelling enemy lines and then sending the soldiers over the top in the face of relentless machine gun fire and artillery was a tactic repeated again and again, and it didn't work. It made very little progress, but the High Command kept repeating this, and the Tommies were slaughtered. My favourite book from World War One was August 1914 by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which showed that the Russian High Command was just as incompetent as the British High Command, waging a war they didn't understand against the German military. W is for Washington and White House and worst. Who would you consider the worst president? Is it James Buchanan? W is for Warhol, Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol said, "Art is whatever you can get away with." What's your opinion of works of art like Damien Hirst's Away from the Flock, where he put a sheep in a tank of formaldehyde, or Tracey Emin's My Bed, where she exhibited her bed, her unmade bed, as an installation piece? W is for wood, and again we have a log cabin. Imagine you're in this log cabin with no internet and no Kindle, but there are 6 books there. Which of these would you choose first, and which would you leave till last? The 6 books are Meridian by Alice Walker, Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, Time Machine by H.G. Wells, Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear, The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, and Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. Which of these would you choose to read first, and which would you leave till last? You can also rank the other books if you so wish. Who do I tag? Well, for W, of course, I'll tag Rowan, because his channel We Damage We begins with a W, and Rowan is one of the booktubers who's been doing almost all of these tags. Other booktubers who've been doing most of these tags have been James Holder and Steve Donahue. I don't really need to tag them because I expect them to do this tag. I also tag Wheelash with a book. I hope she's still putting out booktube content. And Working Man Reads, because all of these begin with a W. Also, if you like the prompts, if you want to do this, please feel free to do this. W is for Wales. Wales is a country, but it's not an independent state. Have you been to Wales? I lived in Wales for 5 years of my life. I studied in Wales at the University of Wales, Aberystwyth. I also lived in Llangamach and Llanfihangel and Bran. I think Wales is a great country to visit. I'm not sure it's a great country to live in. I found particularly central Wales, Llangamach and Powys, to be too parochial, but I loved studying in Aberystwyth, and the Welsh coastline is beautiful. W is for Wuhan. Wuhan is the largest city beginning with W, but we know Wuhan for something else now, this pandemic. Have you read any books about a pandemic? I'm currently listening on Audible to The Stand, and I'm listening to it as I walk around Tbilisi, and I see people wearing masks, and if somebody sneezes it can be a bit worrying, because The Stand is also about a pandemic, a flu pandemic, but in The Stand this pandemic is 99.4% fatal. Who is Afraid of Virginia Woolf? A play by Edward Albee. Is there a writer whose writing intimidates you? Virginia Woolf was a little bit intimidating, but I did read Mrs. Dalloway this year, and on Pay's recommendation I got to The Lighthouse, which I hope to read sometime later this year. Other writers might be a bit intimidating. James Joyce. I haven't read Ulysses of Finnegan's Wake, and from what Steve Donahue says, maybe I won't be reading those. Also, Marcel Proust, La Recherche du Temps Perdu, is intimidating just because it's so long. And War and Peace is intimidating. Are there any books which intimidate you? W is for word games. There are many word games. This is Upwards, where you can put the letters on top of one another. Scrabble, the classic word game. There's also Lexicon. Do you have a favourite word game? For me it would be Scrabble. I've played a lot of Scrabble in my life. I used to play as a child with my grandmother, but I've been playing a long time. I have played some online, but online people can cheat very easily by using online anagram makers, anagrams. W is for We the Drowned by Carsten Jensen. This was a Danish bestseller. It's a multi-generational tale about the seafaring town of Marstal and the inhabitants. It goes from 1848 to the end of World War II, and it's a fantastic book. It's one of the best books I've read this year. It's about sailing, it's about the men who go out to sea, many of whom drown, and it's about the people left behind. It's interesting because a lot of it's told in first person plural, we. The we being the classmates of the men who drowned, the we being on the ships with the men who had tales at the sea, and the we also being the women left behind when the men went to sea. Have you read any books using the first person plural, we, rather than I or a third person narration? W is for writing. Have you written any books? I haven't written any books. I do have one publication, which is a bibliography of transport for disabled people, which I put together when I worked for the GLC, the Greater London Council, back in the 1980s. I can't hold it up because I don't know where it is at the moment, but that's my only publication. If you like this video, you can like and subscribe below, and I will see you on the next video. The next tag will be the X tag. Any ideas, any suggestions for prompts for the X tag, if you could put them in the comments, that would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise I might end up doing an XYZ tag together.